2012 says, only if an employer can provide good reasons why a person is not permanently employed but on fixed-term contract will that be allowed. Otherwise, employees, workers are generally regarded as permanently employed. And that law and that specific provision was passed to put an end to this practice of keeping people in insecurity, workers forever on contracts, and they know when they complain about anything or when they just want to enforce even their rights, they can be dismissed very easily. So the short answer is, in terms of the Labour Amendment Act of 2012, it is illegal, and it's certainly an unfair labor practice to keep people perpetually on short-term contracts. Workers have then a right to demand to be permanently employed. If the work is there permanently, they should also be permanently employed.
Right. Now, how does the long-term contract employment impact on the standard of living for low-income earners?
That is one of the main reasons why employers resort to it. They keep workers in insecure employment, and every time they can just offer the same or with very minimal adjustments. And then they say, well, if you don't like it, we don't give you another contract. So it's a highly exploitative practice. For workers themselves, it then means they can never plan their lives. They never have any guaranteed income over longer periods of time. They go from contract to contract, and it leaves them in a highly vulnerable position and shifts all power to employers. And that's why this is such an unfair labor practice. And it's highly exploitative. And the principle should be, for work that is ongoing, that happens all the time, there must be a permanent contract, permanent employment, because there's absolutely no reason to do otherwise. And only for work that's very short-term in nature, that happens just a day or two, and then the work is gone. In such cases, temporary contracts can be utilized, but this large-scale use over long periods of time has terrible effects on workers' lives, their job security, their ability to plan, and their living standards.
Right. Now, some of the employees who have been working for more than 30 years ended up retiring with no benefits. What are your thoughts on this?
That is precisely the concrete example that verifies this set. 30 years of contracts on renewed contracts is just unbelievable. And it means that workers are deprived of their benefits throughout the 30 years, but also when they come to a retirement age, they then sit with virtually nothing. By labor law, it says you must at least get 1 week's pay for each year that you worked as severance pay. But now, when you have continuous short-term contracts, employers use that as a justification to even get around the payment of severance pay. So it's highly exploitative, and it leaves workers at the end of working life absolutely destitute. The only that they will then get in terms of income is the social pension that everyone gets, every Namibian gets at the age of 60, right, from age of 60 onwards. But other than that, in terms of their contributions during their working lives, there's absolutely nothing coming their way. And that just shows you how exploitative it is and how vulnerable workers are on these endless short-term contracts.
Now, the issue of two unions representing employees at an institution is becoming common. What does it say about the bargaining of power, and how does the two-third majority rule apply?
Okay, in terms of the Labour Act, there is nothing like a two-thirds majority rule. What the Labour Act says is the union who represents the majority of employees in a bargaining unit must be recognized as the exclusive bargaining agent. Meaning that union which represents the majority is the one that then negotiates on behalf of employees. Now, like you rightly said, that some workplaces we have two unions, at others we have even 3 or 4 that are then competing with each other. Legally, nothing stops unions from negotiating together, basically pooling their members and say, we negotiate with the employer as a united front. Practically, that's hardly happening because unions see each other more than rivals than as comrades in arms. So you have at some workplaces where one union fights for the majority membership and the other as well. In the end, none might achieve the majority, and the employer then uses the gap to say, well, nobody represents the majority, so we are not going to negotiate with anyone. And that's very detrimental to workers. We've had that scenario for a while at ShopRite, for example. So for unions, it's really time to say, what is in the interest of workers here? If there's not an outright majority, are there options of union working with each other? After all, they all proclaim to be fighting for workers' rights, and therefore there should be some common interest and defending workers' interests. Otherwise, having multiple unions at one workplace could be detrimental in terms of dividing workers and then shifting power to the employer to take decisions instead of workers through their unions having a say in what happens at the workplace and also negotiating for their own better wages and benefits. So it's a tricky situation, but by law, there's nothing to prevent new unions from emerging. And we've seen that over the years, that more and more unions are being registered.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Herbert Jauch, for enlightening us on this matter.
You're most welcome. Thank you.
Well, that was Mr. Herbert Jauch, a labor researcher who gave us an in-depth analysis on the matter.